Don't let rampant politics and clusterfuckery ruin all your projects and your sanity. Smooth ugly penny lines and make it all make sense. Get experience by osmosis here on Corporate Underpants.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of Corporate Underpants. This is actually my 10th episode, so thank you all so much for joining and for supporting thus far. And I'm now thinking that I should possibly rename this podcast Confessions of the Worst Marketer in the World, because even the couple of people who do consistently listen aren't getting notifications of new episodes. So for those of you listening to me now that I've become bigger than Beyonce in a year or so, you're going to shake your heads. But for those of you who are joining me now, welcome and thanks for being here. Okay. Corporate Underpants is all about the real issues that get in the way when we are trying to design great products. We know how to do it. We've been working in tech for decades now. We know how to do user experience, how to do research, how to figure out if somebody's going to like something. And yet we always launch lackluster or chaotic or meh products. And why is that the case? And my assertion is it's corporate underpants, which is communication issues, personality issues, politics issues. And what I'm doing is gathering guests who have stories to tell of corporate underpants and have ideas for you as you become more senior for how you can avoid or deal with corporate politics and managing up, which becomes a huge part of user-centered design, even though the executives aren't the users of the products. They're the users of us, the professionals trying to make great decisions about the products. And so I'm really excited about my guest today. I've known him for years, and I'm going to bring him on right away. His name is Dr. Bill Albert. Hello. Good morning.
Good afternoon. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. We were just chatting before this started. You reminded me how we knew each other. We met years and years and years ago, like almost 20 years ago, when I was doing classes for Nielsen Norman Group on personas with John Pruitt, the co-author of the Persona Lifecycle book called Getting from Data to Great Design. And you were there too, right? In London.
Yeah, I was actually running another course with Tom Tullis on measuring the user experience.
And we were just talking about Tom. Tom Tullis was a leader in our field when it came to data and user experience. And unfortunately, we lost him to COVID. I have an interview with Tom from 2006 recorded as part of the UX Pioneer series that I've got to get organized around and share. But I was able to connect with his daughter, Cheryl Tullis, who is also in our field, and share that with her.
Yeah. Tom was just a wonderful mentor, a really dear friend. And yeah, I feel his presence often, especially when I'm talking about or writing about UX measurement.
Yeah. Really good teacher too.
Yeah.
Right. Did a lot of teaching. Okay. So tell us what you're doing now. We fast forward from meeting at Nielsen Norman Group at the lunchroom and talking to the cantankerous Don Norman and the cheerful Jacob Nielsen. And what are you doing now?
Yeah. So right now, for about the last almost year, I've been heading up consultancy called Greenlight Idea Lab, and really focused on product validation. So I've been working in UX research for about 25 years, and only recently in the last few years have really pivoted to trying to answer the question is, should we even build it, right? Should we just build this new product? Should we launch it instead of, here's a product, how do we improve it? How do we make it better? Which is very important, but it's a very different question. At Greenlight Idea Lab, we're really focused on kind of stress testing, very early customer concept designs, all the way up through product solutions.
Okay, so the reason this is so fascinating to me is because you and I both ended up swimming upstream. We both started hardcore in UX, and all the analogy that I use is like the method to build the house, right?
Yeah.
The method to figure out where to put the house and the method to figure out how to build the house and where to put the bathrooms. And both of us were like, wait a second, getting really good at this isn't enough because we still launch crappy houses.
And the reason is because of the foundation.
The foundation. Yeah.
The foundation is like causing the cracks. It's causing a lot of the problems. And so in our field, what is the foundation? And I would argue, for most products, that foundation is solving a problem that people really care about.
And it's interesting because you talk about the foundation and earthquakes, and I talk about tornadoes, right? And where the troubles come from. So the foundation in our imaginary house situation is whatever it's supposed to be bedrock that we're building on. It's supposed to be, some people we're supposed to come in, some business brains, and say, if we build this product for these people, they will pay us. I mean, fundamentally, it comes down to that, right? They will choose us over our competition. They will pay us a certain amount of money, and our business will be a success.
Exactly. And it's about delivering value, right? And the value is in the form of solving a problem that I have right now that I need to have solved, whether it's for my business or my personal life. You're making something better. I'm able to make more money, have more time, whenever that is, right? But that is, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do.
Yes, somebody has to have a pain.
Yeah.
These aren't houses for people that already have houses. These are houses for people that have a big problem and need, and then value proposition and differentiator is, what are you offering that no one else can, and why should I care? And the I in that is whoever you're trying to sell it to, whoever the user of the product is, sometimes not the same people. So back in the day when we were both teaching at Nielsen Norman Group, I think we were teaching a similar idea, which is that that at that point, the way to swim upstream was to say, we need to be more involved with data. That was news in the early 2000s, that UX people couldn't just be wireframing and usability testing, that we had to get interested in other kinds of data as well. Tell me more about that time.
Yeah. So in the early 2000s, when I was getting into UX, I came from a research background, and it seemed like we would do all these usability tests, and that was very insightful, but it seemed like there wasn't much rigor. Everybody's coming up with all sorts of different interpretations. And I thought, if this is the field I'm going into, I really want it to be a little bit more rigorous. I want there to be some methodology that's going to produce similar results. Maybe that's just the scientific method brain that I have. And that's when I met Tom at Fidelity in the early 2000s. And we started talking about metrics, and different people were using different things, but it really wasn't formalized in any way. It was like a Wild West. And actually, I'd come up with this idea of writing a book because there was nothing on the topic, and walked into his office one day and said, I got a crazy idea. Feel free to say no. And I said, let's write a book on measurement. And without hesitation, Tom said, absolutely, let's do it. I'm like, wait, hold on. It's a big commitment. But he said, no, let's do it. And we wrote it and started in 2006. First edition came out in 2008. I'm writing the fourth edition that's going to come out in 2026 now.
You wrote that fast. It took John and I 5 years to write the first persona lifecycle. It was way too long. That's probably the reason why.
But I think we were in some ways ahead of our time. I don't mean that to boost myself up, but at that time, everything was so qualitative, right?
Yeah.
And we're just starting to see the signs that we needed to have more data, more of a quant mix into what we do. And part of it is what we're going to talk about is around stakeholder alignment and how you communicate your insights to stakeholders, to senior management in a way that they might be able to understand better or appreciate or find more useful potential.
That's a really interesting lens. I haven't really thought about that, but the Persona Lifecycle book, which we wrote between 2000 and 2005, the original edition, it came into a hole where people were excited about personas. Personas were failing and nobody understood why. And Cooper hadn't published yet a way to create them. And in the book, John and I came up with a way to take various data sources, quant and qual, and mush them by literally cutting and pasting pieces of data onto pieces of paper to find patterns, to actually operationalize the idea of finding patterns. But what you're saying actually is really interesting, because in the lens of today, the data that we were able to get was really limited. Even if we could have a bunch of data. It came from disparate sources. It came from earlier user research methods, um, which weren't bad, but they weren't fully developed or understood. We didn't have our own data yet completely.
And it's what you were doing, I think, at a high level, and what I was doing, the connective tissue there is that we were looking for information that would give us more reliability in what we're saying,
Right.
right? We want to be more comprehensive and more reliable so we can make the right decisions, right? But
Well, we wanted to justify our existence too, which, by the way, all of us are still doing. We were talking
yeah,
earlier about, there's a never ending stream for the last 25 years of chaos about what we call ourselves, how we justify our existence. And so I think searching for ways to prove our own ROI has been a continuing challenge. And I think searching upstream for me, it was searching for what's going on with the exec team. For you, it was like, wait a second, how can we actually get more rational about what we call data and how we use it?
yeah, for sure. I think that's a kind of a common theme for a lot of people I know at a certain age that they start moving more upstream. We don't have many decades left of our working life, and we want to work on things that mean a lot, that's going to have more impact. And for me, I'm tired of seeing products launched that no one uses, no one wants, no one asks for what. It's a waste of time and resources and morale, everything about it. So that's where I started really doing a deep dive into the product validation. Prove to me, what is the evidence that this product's solving a problem that people care about?
And I think this is really interesting in terms of AI. So we just had a comment, whoever you are, I don't have your name on here. You can tell us your name and I'll mention it. This conversation is very relevant to what I am cooking up with AI. Being early to AI requires going upstream, and how can we make the right decisions when there isn't a blueprint? What do you think about the proliferation of AI generated software?
In my non-AI expert opinion, is I've seen AI is an incredibly powerful, useful tool in the UX ecosystem, right? It's really good for a lot of things. It's not so good for creativity and innovation. I think right now, it's about how you can use it in really smart ways. I think it's about a year ago, I described AI as a smart intern who shows up drunk to work every now and then. I think it's getting a little bit better than that. It might be a smart junior level person who doesn't drink all that often, but occasionally says some pretty stupid stuff.
As someone who gets drunk on one glass of wine, that would probably be me. I'm trying to think of an analogy, but to me, and I'm not sure I can defend this analogy, but it's like the rise of self-publishing. Now there are gazillions of books, gazillions and gazillions. It doesn't mean that the number of quality books that are out there have increased. It just means that there's more and more noise and lots of people making a little bit of money, let's say.
Yeah. But I think with AI, the point at least I'm trying to make around delivering value or solving problems with product is still the same. Like, how can you use AI to build something better or faster or smarter?
Right.
But the goal is still the same. We're not leading with technology. Technology is in service of solving a problem. And I think that should always be the perspective, not here's AI. Now, how do we use it to do something? No, it should be, here's the problem. If AI is a great solution, great, but maybe there's something else.
Yeah, I think the way I'm thinking of AI is still the same, which is that it's really great for tedious tasks. It's really great for assisting. But if you start to let it loose on the innovation parts, you got to buyer beware, because it's all based on data that exists. And data, like you say, is that was your quote, data is just data, right?
Yeah.
Say more about data just being data.
Yeah, that's what I said. And somebody in the UX, like we can collect all the data we want and have it sit on a shelf, but the only real value in data is how it's used,
Mhm.
right? And what does it mean for the data to be used? It's going to be used to probably make a decision, right? It could be at the design level and moving a button to the left. It could be around something about the product strategy piece or whether to launch or what have you. But somebody on the other end is taking in that data and has to understand it, interpret it, and translate that into some decision. And that's where the value is, right? Data
Okay.
itself doesn't, it's like a car that just doesn't move. That doesn't make sense, right? Cars were meant to take you someplace.
Yes, and you can have a car that has all the right parts and it still doesn't move. And you can have a car that's moving that people say is moving in the wrong direction. I'm analogy queen today.
Oh,
Okay, so let's get to, I think so many of the millions of people who listen to this are convinced of that. And so let's figure out, what I'd like to do is get some stories from your brain that help people understand, first of all, how you decided to go from senior level internal jobs to become a consultant to creating this agency to solve what I assume, if we use our own method, are problems of potential customers. So, what was your last big job in-house?
so I left Fidelity a long time ago. I was there for 7 years. I was heading up the Bentley User Experience Center for 13 years. And
And that's a school. That's a big school in UX.
it's one of the top UX graduate programs in the country, if not the world. And they have user experience center there with staff and graduate students, a teaching hospital model, if you will, for UX.
Mhm.
And I loved it. I was there for 13 years, really enjoyed it, loved working with the graduate students, and we were providing services to all sorts of companies. But after 13 years, I was ready for a new challenge. We weren't doing the upfront stuff that I wanted to do. We were more in doing the traditional UX research projects, a lot of usability testing and all that, and had an opportunity to join a consultancy called Mach 49 to be the global head of customer experience. They do a lot of venture building with Fortune 500 companies. So these are companies that want to create a new product, new business line. And a big part of their process is to build these new products with a methodology around customer experience, or they called customer development. And it was really my first exposure to this idea of product market and the importance of solving customer pain and making sure that the products that are being built, people really want. Customer desirability instead of the usability. And
And this is where we start merging into the world of business, of what we previously thought of as somebody else's job. So, can you say more about product market fit, about what you just
product market fit really simply is when you are launching a product, is your product going to resonate with your target audience, right? They going to buy it, use it, whatever. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. It's the unit economics, the business model, the pricing, the go-to market strategy is all going to affect that. But really the underlying piece of product market fit is the desirability for it. And the desirability is completely tied to solving customer pain. It's delivering some value.
And it's not just about asking them. That's the other.
No.
We have another comment that loves your comment about innovation needing to focus on products that make good on the promise of technology that enhances people's lives. And
For sure.
the other thing is you can't. So there's a quote so then you would think to get product market fit, you just go out there and interview a bunch of people who would be potential customers. But the problem with that is that, and there's a quote on page 123 of Cooper's book that says, merely being the victim of a particular problem does not automatically bestow on one the power to see its solution, which basically means the mouse in the maze is the wrong person to ask how to get out of the maze, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so depending on where you are, whether you're trying to validate the customer pain, you're trying to validate the value proposition or the idea or the solution, that different level of fidelity is going to dictate what type of data you need, right? early on, if it's just a sketch on a napkin, I can't say, hey, would you pay for this? That question doesn't make sense, right? They have no
Right.
way to respond to that, even though some people do try to ask that question, right? When we're getting to something that is interactive or live or clickable, we're looking for behaviors, right? We're looking for people to sign up for demos or to put down their credit card. All different signals at different times tells us something about the level of desirability for that product.
So that's to operationalize the desire. That's to say, if the desire has been created, how do we let them fulfill that desire by signing up, by using the feature or the functionality, by learning about other tools?
Yes, it is it is a reflection of here's a solution to a problem that you have that you care about that you need solved right away.
So were you discovering when you were at Mach 49, I think that's what you said
Yeah.
to us, were you did you started to get interested in product market fit,
Yeah.
data, how to do that? What were your big aha moments tenure?
Yeah. My big aha moment was we were sitting around a virtual Miro board with different value propositions and saying, okay, we really believe we understand the customer pains. These are the top pains. Okay, fine. Here are the different ideas to address them. All right, there's 8 of us. We're gonna just do a dot vote. Put your sticky.
A
Which one
dot
should we
vote.
go with? And I'm like,
Oh my god.
oh, I was like, this is a really big decision. We're gonna go like east, north, west. Like it could go any number of directions. Hold on a second. I think that there needs to be a little bit more data and rigor. Now, sometimes we would do that. We would try to bring in data, but it was always much smaller sample size than I wanted. And I just felt like there was more that we could do.
Yes, there's gotta be more that we could do than a dot vote on a Miro to decide the direction of a
Yeah.
it's so obvious when you say that.
And it's not just Mach 49, but there are a lot of other companies, venture studios, innovation teams that are essentially doing the same thing. And the question is, well, why?
Oh, okay.
And I think it's, people want to move quickly. They want to start building the thing. There's a real strong momentum to get to, let's start building the house. Who's got the nails? Who's got the hammers? Because you feel like you're wasting time if you're not like pounding a board in.
Especially now is let's just start building it.
Yeah, let's
You know,
launch.
the race is crazy.
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
And the other thing is to do it takes a little bit more time and thought. I think it's not always easy. Sometimes it's not easy to find the right people to talk to, but those are just logistics. I think you can definitely figure out solutions to those problems.
Okay, so you took that sort of perplexed response to deciding the fate of a company based on a dot vote, and you said there's gotta be something better than this.
There's got to be something better. And there
So
is.
what did you do? What'd
Yeah,
you do?
so I started up Greenlight Idea Lab to really build on that methodology and create like a system of scorecards. So we could take this idea of customer pain and say, what does that really mean? It's about the frequency or the urgency or the severity or that the pain is not being solved elsewhere, and kind of deconstruct from customer pain to the value proposition to the product solution and score it. And basically through metrics and data is really try to de-risk the product development process.
Does that assume that you already know the pain point?
We have to validate the pain, right? So we're validating the pain.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's
And
see.
here's a while you think about it, a listener says it's economics. How do you make use of limited resources? Customers can tell you what the resources are, but they struggle to tell you how to use them in better and novel new ways. They often struggle to tell you their pain points. They tell you the solution they think would be the best one,
Yeah.
but they don't. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
put a
no.
spot.
Yeah. So here's a project that we worked on was for kind of the automotive transportation industry. And we really wanted to understand for people that manage fleets of cars for like delivery, right? What are their pain points? And one of the big pain points is every time they take like a van or a truck off the road to get serviced, they're losing money. And they have too much, there's too much time spent coordinating, servicing all these vehicles.
Oh, that makes sense.
And hey, maybe there's a way it can be done at night in parked where they normally park and they don't have to bring them in. So it all happens seamlessly. And that's just an example of understanding kind of this ecosystem and where there's a particular pain and how big of a pain is it and how does that connect with their business.
Did they come up with the idea of doing it at night? Did you guys come up with it?
I forgot. We were all sitting around the room but we understand the pain now. What are the ideas? What are the solutions to solve that pain?
Were there any other ideas?
Yeah, there's a whole business now built around this.
Yeah.
No. So there's a lot of different things like the whole automotive and repair industry is ripe for disruption.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So let me pivot a little bit to, you now have Greenlight Idea Lab, and you've constructed it as, I call it a virtual agency, but basically you have a lot of really great brains, but they don't work full time for Greenlight, right? They are available as a network of senior people. And I think a lot of us have thought about trying to do that. Oh, and I have friends here in Seattle who are some of the best people I know. We get together every once in a while over tacos and talk about how the Gentle Persons of UX group should become an agency. And all of us are like, God, no. So you decided to try it. You decided to leave a consulting agency and start your own. And that's a consideration so many people are making, especially now. What are the lessons you learned from that?
Oh boy, it's so personal in a way, like to your own situation. I'm fortunate my wife has a stable job. She's tenured. So I don't have to, that was very helpful.
Smart. Okay. That's number
someone
one.
smart who's got a stable income. And for me though, what I really wanted to do is in the next 5 to 10 years, I want to have an impact. I want my work to matter. And the way I thought I can do this with this model. I love consulting. I love working with different companies. I love the unique challenges. I love learning new domains. And the model of having this sort of collective is, I don't know where my next project is going to come from. I don't know when it's going to be. I know that I need smart people who I know and I trust. And as long as they're comfortable being on the bench and for me to say, hey, Tamara, hey, whoever, I have a project I think you'd be a great fit for. You interested? That's a deal. And if they can
Can I
say,
ask you something? I want to ask you something. In 5 years, how will you know that your work mattered? How will you measure that?
I will feel it or I won't feel it. I don't think that there's a metric. I think that in many ways, it's not just about the work, but it's also about the relationships. And when I look back on my career, I think of all the wonderful people I've met along the way who've really helped me, like we were talking about Tom at the very beginning. And I think that's a big part of it. A lot of the people at Greenlight were people that I worked with at Mach 49.
Will it also be that, does it also have to do with these methods that you're continuing to develop and this philosophy on how to use data to validate product market fit and then turn that into a design?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. It's seeing how the data that you're collecting are being used in ways that's helping organizations make the right decision, whether it's to go forward with this product or to kill an idea early and save money. You see it a lot anecdotally, especially as you continually work with the same organizations over time.
So they keep coming back. That's a huge success.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know it's really tough out there right now. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in a sort of a similar spot, but a similar headspace, different moment where it's like, I know some good ways to do things. And I'm so dead set sure on some of the tools that I've created. And it's just a huge desire to get it out there and have people use it and nod their heads. And
Yeah.
because I think both of us have identified pain points in our industry among our colleagues. Oh, somebody said something nice, which is, it seems like Bill changes the world by empowering others to succeed.
Oh,
Yeah, and that somebody else said it's as good advice as to marry rich, as to marry smart and marry somebody who's going to get tenure. That's a great idea. So when you engage with as a client, I'm sure you tell us the types of clients that I'm asking you this because I want to ask about that early alignment problem. So what kinds of people come to you with projects?
so it's an organization that would recognize the need that they really got to get this right. They got to get this product right. It's not just about checking a box that you launched a product, but it's about product success. It's got to achieve some product market fit over time. And they want to do the right thing. And they may not have the skills in-house to do the customer discovery and design and validation work, right? So that would be the type of client that we would put a talk to. So,
And those are usually people who have had previous failures. I call them
yeah,
pre-disaster.
or previous failures. I hate to say it, but some of their own comp is riding on the success or failure of a particular product launch.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So if you've got skin in the game, you're like, I got to get this right. So how are you being incentivized? Are you going to get it?
So people are signed up to get bonuses based on the success of it. I hadn't even thought of that.
And what's even worse though, is it's incentivized to launch a product. And that's the metric, is how many products did you launch this year?
Oh, okay.
That to me just doesn't make any sense. There's plenty of products out there that no one uses. They're just collecting dust.
Okay, so they come to you for whatever reason, they want to do a product. And what are your first conversations like with them?
Well, first off, it's really, I think listening is the core piece of it. Trying to understand where they are, what they need, and how what we do can help them, and trying to connect the dots there. Saying, okay, you're at the point right now where you've developed a couple of you feel like you understand the customer pain. You've developed a couple ideas, maybe very early concept designs, and you're not sure which way to go. Right? Okay, this is what we can do, right? We can do a mixed methods approach, collect the data to understand why some people might prefer one over the other, but also do the quant piece and get a large sample size, and to use our scorecard system to essentially measure how well a value proposition is resonating with one audience or the other, et cetera, et cetera. So give them clear direction on which way they should go.
So you're in a discovery and sales conversation at the same time where you're trying to introduce them to ways that they can de-risk their decision.
Yeah. Sales is such a funny word because there's for many people, especially UX people, a negative connotation around sales. I'm not selling me or Greenlight. I'm selling the methodology or the process and the outcome. And that's what I believe in. Use us, great. Use somebody else, that's fine too. I won't take offense. Right. But this is what I really believe. And I know I've seen it too many times. Here's one story for you. This was years ago at Bentley. A client came to us, a very well-known brand that is known for coffee makers. and specifically little pods,
Oh,
okay, that you put
yeah.
in and you get a cup of coffee. And they had done a joint venture with an alcohol company, also a very big brand. And they built a machine that will deliver cocktails to you by putting alcoholic pod in, and you put in like the water, the tonic, whatever, club soda, and you say Moscow Mule or margarita, and out it comes, right?
What could go wrong, really?
Yeah. And so we tested it, and it was fascinating, right? And, we were testing the usability, the human factors of this system. And then people are like, okay, yeah, I get it. It's not that hard. I'm just pressing a couple buttons. Works like the coffee. And there were some other issues, maybe about the cost of the pods, et cetera. But then people are like, why would I want this? And we're like, you're having some friends over for dinner and you want to serve them a cocktail. I'm like, I'm not going to take a pod and put it into a machine and then just, as a host, you want to make your own cocktails for them.
It's not, and
Right.
it's like, what's the super hard part? Knowing the ingredients? I mean,
It
anyway,
was like, and so then I'm like, what's the problem? What are you solving with this? And then the one use case, they're like, it's people who love cocktails who have a boat and they don't have the space for a bar and they want, I'm like,
a boat.
I was like, and it just really got me. I was like, oh man, that was such a, when we talked about that and talking about stakeholder alignment or using data, it's like, hey, this is what we're hearing. And it's just, nope, just, we've already determined that there's a market for this.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
what they determined is they wanted to find another way to profit off of the pod idea,
Yes.
and they had talked themselves into it.
Yeah.
Were you able to convince them?
Nope.
What happened?
They failed.
Oh, okay, that's a short and sweet.
It was,
We have a comment that if testing the cocktail maker sounds fun.
yeah. And so it just, it was a real eye opener. I had seen this happen in other products that I had been involved with where you start getting these insights into, do people really want this?
Right.
Is it solving a problem? But usually,
Mark's like, boat people is a huge untapped market. And Daniel says tiny home cocktail parties. It's just so, we can talk ourselves into anything. And then we can look at the data of how many people own boats of a certain size and how many days of a week they tend to go on those boats and what the typical length of their journey. Like, we can gather all this data that
yeah.
lets us tell ourselves that this is a huge market and create a slide deck around it.
Yep. Yep. Pull numbers out of the air, and all of a sudden you've got a really compelling business case.
With Greenlight, do you have a case that you can tell us about where you were able to convince people to go a different direction or not go a direction?
Yeah, there was another company that I worked with where they had developed a product in-house to help them really manage their business. And they thought it was the best thing in the entire world. It's for a large construction company that has to deal with a lot of staffing and resourcing and how they would scope out projects and who's working on what, when, and controlled everything. It was like this huge, complicated spreadsheet. And they said, we think we can convert this into a product, right? And we want you to see how people would respond to this. So we started going out and talking to a lot of people. And what we found was I was open-minded, and they said, yeah, actually, I can see the value of this. This is much better than what we have. And they were trying to get it it was like on a Salesforce and the Salesforce app store, but people weren't downloading it. And they really wanted to invest heavily in it. But there was one big problem, is that everybody has a legacy system that they're using, that they're comfortable with, that they know. And the switching costs were extremely high in terms of getting in and being able to extract all the data from their backends, all that stuff. It seemed a real problem. So we did the study, we evaluated the solution that they had and found essentially people love the idea in the solution, but there was this other barrier to entry and that they need to figure out a way to get around that before moving forward with the product.
I love that point. Switching costs, we get so enamored of our better way that we don't think about how hard it would be to stop doing it their old bad way. It doesn't matter if it sucks. The switching cost is so huge that I'm like, I'm going to stick with the devil I know. It doesn't matter how many numbers you throw at me about how much more convenient or streamlined this is.
Yep.
So you actually were able to, and were they like, we hadn't thought about switching costs?
I don't think they understood the magnitude of it. They're still trying to figure that out. Like they're still trying to do it. What's fascinating is that people say, I understand you have something much better than I'm using a spreadsheet. They're not, people are not blind. They understand the value, but I think the delta has to be so extreme
Then it's worth it.
that it's worth it. My pain is so severe and your solution is so much better that I'm willing to do whatever it is to get to that point.
I worked with a construction related software company, and they were trying to replace a system that's whiteboards, sticky notes, pieces of paper that are printed out in the morning in a trailer and handed to 19-year-old yard kids who are trying to track down equipment in a freaking mile-long, mile-wide yard. And obviously they know it's a mess. But the idea of trying to change everything, including the habits and preferences of a bunch of old guys who've been working there forever, it's not worth it no matter how worth it is.
Yeah.
Until you have to. Okay, for the people who are listening in today, some of them are relatively senior people who face this problem with their clients or with their bosses. When you go into a meeting, are there certain questions that you ask that you find particularly helpful in getting an aha or oh, I get it out of people?
It's always the most basic questions that usually trip people up. It depends on where they are in the process, but I always want to know, tell me about your customers. Who are they? What problem is your product or your proposed product solving? And I also want to know, what data or evidence do you have to support what you're saying? Right? What are the use cases? And what are your goals? What are your business goals? What are the user goals?
Oh my God, I'm grinning ear to ear. This is what seniority comes down to. Seniority comes down to being willing to and forcing asking these 4 freaking questions.
Yeah.
Which is astounding and upsetting to so many people. You think getting more senior means you know more equations and more tools. No, you get brave enough to ask these questions and not feel stupid.
Yeah, it is really our professional responsibility to ask these questions and to push back when we get an answer we're not satisfied with. And it's hard because we are walking a fine line. We don't want to be disrespectful. In many cases, we're trying to be differential to them based on kind of hierarchy, but we need to stand our ground a little bit and push back a little bit respectfully and say, listen, this is really basic. This is knowing this is going to determine the direction of the product and ultimately the success.
And it's the DNA level questions, I call them.
Yeah.
So Daniel Yeager, another great senior person in our field, these are so basic, so critical, and so hard to get good answers for.
Yeah.
So what are the kinds of answers that you hear, Bill?
Let's see. It depends. Obviously, it depends on the question. Usually, who are your users or customers? It's usually at a very high level. It's usually driven by marketing.
Boat people?
Yeah. What problems is this solving? It's going to be some kind of, not slogan, but sort of tagline for the product.
Wait a second. That's so interesting. What problem is this solving? They come up with a tagline.
Yeah. Or it's such a high level thing. Oh, it's going to streamline your job and make it for you to be able to do things easy, whatever. It's never, it feels a little like, I don't want to say like cotton candy, but there's no meat there. And that's,
Right. Sometimes I come back to that and say, if you can imagine any other company saying the same thing about their product, then it's not specific enough.
yeah. Yeah. But what really gets me though is when I ask them, like, how do you know this? What evidence do you have to back this up? Like evidence-based research, right? I cannot say anything. I'm also one of the many hats I wear. I'm co-editor of the Journal of User Experience, right? And so I'm trained to, what is the evidence you have to make this claim? And it's always, yeah, we ran some study, or I remember this person, or it's just so flimsy. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to know the data inside and out, but there should be some shared understanding, and based somewhere, there should be a ground truth of what they're saying, and not just anecdotes and quotes flying around that has become company lore or whatever.
How do you manage that? Like my whole thing for managing this, I think that's a reflection of misalignment and a reflection of lack of clarity and an inability to talk to each other and a fear of telling each other that they don't really understand what the goals are or who the users are. Like it's just too politically hard to admit that. How do you help them see that and still get them to hire you?
I think it's difficult. I believe in starting from a place of common understanding and saying, all right, this is what I hear us saying, or this is our common belief, that data can be extremely helpful and valuable, and sometimes the only way we're able to make the right decisions. Otherwise, we're just throwing the dice and hoping for the best. So we agree that data is going to be critical in our process, in our product strategy. Okay. Now, what type of data? This is my suggestion, is this type of data is going to help us get there. It's going to help us make these decisions at this time, these decisions, right? And I'm laying out the roadmap of how we're going to be making those decisions and what's going to be feeding into those decisions, right? And so this is what it might look like. If we see this at this point, then this. And so everything is hypothetical. And
But I also love that you're saying, if we do a test of A versus B, you're saying in advance before you do that test, if the answer is B, we'll do this. And if the answer is A, we'll do this other thing. You're saying in advance what you're going to do with the results.
Yes.
Which is another thing that I like to do, is ask them, like, if you find A, what are you going to do? If you find B, and then it tells you whether the research is worth it. And also Daniel says, yeah, his follow-up is, that's great on a conceptual level. Now, how do we connect this to very concrete outcomes? And I think this is all about you. I love that you are able, because of what Greenlight does, to say we all agree that data is awesome. And
so what I'm saying is, all right, if I'm laying this out in the roadmap, here's the destination, right?
Okay.
Destination is a successful product as measured these ways, right? So whether it's purchases or adoption or whatever KPIs you have, that is our North Star. That's what we're moving towards.
sounds like a hypothesis.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how my brain thinks, right? If this, then this, and it's just a tree, right?
Yeah.
We're going to do this. In the data, it's going to tell us to go left or right with high confidence. Now let's go right. Now this is what we're going to do here. And that's all going to lead. And so I think laying it out in the logical format beforehand, where people aren't tied to certain things, certain products or ideas, helps people buy in, just trust that process.
Have you turned that into a deliverable, like a tree that they all agree on? How do you make them all agree on it?
I haven't done that yet. It really depends on the group. It really depends on the group, right? And where they're at. Sometimes the questions are much more basic, and sometimes it's more extensive.
And this to me, and maybe we'll go a couple minutes over on this if you have time, this to me is where the rubber hits the road. to me, it's how do you get that early agreement so that you have that conversation now where you say, we're doing this test. If A happens, then we're going to buy a cat. If B happens, then we're going to buy a dog. And you have the conversation then where everybody gets to agreement. Yeah, that's what we'll do. So that when you 3 weeks later get the result, they don't argue about ferrets.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And sometimes they will argue about ferrets.
They will. I
Yeah.
think that
And
arguing about ferrets should happen earlier, if at all possible,
yeah.
because the later the ferrets show up, the more chaos. This is probably true with real ferrets as well. The later the ferrets show up, the more chaos gets into the process. The
Right.
earlier while it's still hypothetical, then you can argue about it. You can talk about it. You can change the research so that the possible outcomes are A, B, or C.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that they'll do that is very specific. It's almost always about the methodology. It's you know what, you just didn't talk to the right people.
That's Yep.
And it is, yeah, but you know what? I just don't think we talked to 100 people. Do you really think that 20 more would have made a big difference? Like, I can tell you statistically that it probably wouldn't have. Oh no, I think you just didn't talk to this. When we define those audiences, that wasn't brought up as a primary group.
Right.
Like then you're starting getting into the weeds and the minutia of everything. And that's usually never a good sign.
To me, that's so fascinating. We put so much weight on data, collecting data, analyzing data, and yet we never talk about how easy it is to scooch around any data that we have.
And
All it takes is and there was a conversation I had where like one person said one thing at a meeting, what about mobile? And it crashed a huge research project
yeah,
just because they said that at the wrong meeting.
yeah. And I don't know, last time we talked, Tamara, I talked about this research I published on the perception of data visualizations depending on your political affiliation around COVID charts. And one of the takeaways from this research is we perceptually see data differently based on our outlook about what we want to see. And we evaluate the data differently too. We describe it differently. So even if I do everything right from a methodological standpoint, and I'll say, this is what it showed, and I have one person saying go left and the other person saying going right, and we agree this is the data, right? And that's why I think it's really important that you set up these clear kind of guidelines about kind of what to do when, and you can get as much agreement ahead of time as you can, at least realistically.
Yeah, and looping back to AI, this great comment, it's always correct until you realize the model is biased.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating too.
Sure.
And that research study that you did on the different impressions of the same data about COVID, depending on, and we'll put a link to that in the comments as well, because I think we all know that people interpret the same charts differently, but actually having that evidence from your study, I think is really cool. Maybe you'll put up a little article, a summary of that. That's less school-like. I forgot. I don't even know how to say it.
It's
Formal.
pretty academically, it's pretty dense.
Yeah.
I would, put it into AI and have it explain it to you. Yeah.
So another way to talk about green light, I guess, would be avoid ferrets in your product. And that could be your tagline, no ferrets allowed. That would probably be powerful in the industry. Okay, so I want to thank you so much for your time today. And it's so interesting that our paths have run parallel, but also an A versus B sort of splintering. But I think where we agree is that this early agreement on something is extremely important. And that something is really basic and fundamental and missing.
Yeah. And I would just add to that, I think the ingredient or the thing that helps with that early agreement is trust. And trust is based on the relationship you're building. And to the extent that you're able to build a relationship with people, with the stakeholders, builds trust, which builds agreement, which smooths the whole process.
Which is really interesting because that comes from listening and mirroring back. I've recently been working on an RFP. I've never done RFPs, like to do projects. And it's been so hard for me because the way that I do initial conversations about work is to listen to them, talk to me, and ask them about details, not to get some RFP written by someone who doesn't really fully get the language that we use or the processes that we use. They're already coming up with a solution instead of the problem and trying to write a proposal for solving that, where you just want to be like, can we just have a 2-hour conversation and talk? It's confounding me to do that, which is now reminding me why I haven't done that in a while. Do you find that too with RFPs? And
Yeah, there's some RFPs that are written much better than others. And it's oftentimes frustrating because you don't know really what they're asking for or why. And I want to step back and say, wait, why is
well,
this? And sometimes you just have to go with it. Or sometimes they have a process to submit questions and see what everybody asks. And
because we're missing the basics.
yeah.
Okay, so what I want to leave people with is from the great mind of Bill Albert, there are ways to operationalize product market fit, to get data around it. And it all comes back to us being bold and brave enough to ask really basic questions and be prepared for the fact that they don't know the answer.
Yeah.
Okay, any final notes for us?
I just want to thank you again. It's always a pleasure and a real hoot to talk with you. I've really enjoyed our time.
Oh, I have too, Bill. Thank you so much. And for those of you listening, we'll have another live Corporate Underpants coming up soon, I believe on May 15th, I think with Andy Fitzgerald, who is an information architecture taxonomy wizard. And of course, the recordings are available on any of your favorite podcast platforms, and you can reach out to me anytime at adlininc.com or corporateunderpants.com. Thank you, Bill. Have a great day. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Corporate Underpants, and there's lots more to come. If you have any projects that you need my help on, if you're interested in coaching to help you become a more senior product leader through understanding alignment and politics, or if you're interested in any of the classes or other learning materials and books that I'm developing, please visit my website, www.adlininc.com, and get in touch. Let's talk.